Okay, now, thanks for the reminder, Ted.
Okay.
Well, let's see, on my screen, Patrick, you're up in the upper left corner. You want to start us off?
Okay, I'm from Kansas City, Missouri at, at the moment.
Planning to move? Is there an announcement?
With all this talk about hurricanes and tornadoes, you never know.
Yeah. Here I'm in the New York Catskills, a little town called Lake Huntington, about 2 hours northwest of the city. Tad?
I'm in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and we, a little lucky here. We're next to the lake. We really don't get, we don't have to worry about anything but occasional tornadoes. But living in the city, that helps because I think with all the infrastructure and the buildings and that, storms like that either go up over us or north or south of us. I don't think there has ever been a tornado that's touched down in the city of Milwaukee that I have record of at all. So that's the only thing I have to worry. I wouldn't want to live in Tornado Alley or in Florida. Either one of those is not the place I'd want to be. So, okay.
Gary, let us know where you're at the moment.
Alrighty, Gary Parks. I am living currently in Fluvanna County, Virginia, right outside Lake Monticello. And we drive into town. We pass Thomas Jefferson's house every day. And town is Charlottesville, Virginia. Originally, I'm from New Jersey, which is where I do my research for my family.
Barb?
Well, I'm in the state of Washington in a small town called Stillicum, name of the native tribe way back.
Did you cut out or?
Oh, am I not here?
Sounds like.
Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Here.
Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you. I think Ken's line is
Ken's
going
having
out.
trouble. He's frozen.
I know where you are, but.
It's a small town of just below 7,000 people. We're right on Puget Sound. But I grew up in Fairfield, Connecticut, so I traded Long Island Sound for Puget Sound. We came out here with the Air Force. We don't have hurricanes, tornadoes, but occasionally earthquakes. And our worst one was in 2001, was really bad. Fortunately, we were okay with our house. Pictures were all off the walls and knickknacks and all. But we call this God's country because the weather is really great. Today's going to be 80 degrees.
Sounds
I
good.
forgot we were doing a weather report, and I have to proudly say, I think Central Virginia, the Piedmont, has the nicest weather, moderate weather in the country.
And we've had to deal with a lot of forest fires. We've had smoke come down from Canada and Eastern Washington, which is where my two boys live. They've had two terrible fires lately where my younger son was able to get out of work and get back on I-90 to get home, and then everything closed down. So I think that fire is contained now. It was 93% contained a few days ago, but it should be out now. I haven't checked today, but very scary with the fires. We had one close by at Fort Stillicum Park. I could see the smoke over the neighbor's house, but I'm about a mile away. But everyone within a half mile had to evacuate. And the college that I worked at, they all had to leave the campus. But no one was hurt, no facilities damaged, just Fort Park is a mess.
Wilma?
Well, I'm in the home of tornadoes, Oklahoma, and Edmond, Oklahoma. We've been here about 10 years now. My husband was in the Navy for 30 years, so we've lived all around the countryside and overseas, but we like it here, even though We don't know what the weather's going to be when we wake up in the morning.
Look, Carrie, we've talked about your Florida adventures, and Ken, you said you were in Durham, New York, right?
That's correct. Northwestern Catskills.
Yep.
So
And
we're not too far apart.
yep, no. And there's John. He finally made himself visible. Are you still in Canada right now, John? I can't hear you. Can anybody else?
Nope.
No.
He's got to turn on his mic.
Still not hearing.
Is he the John from Belgium?
Yeah.
Luxembourg, I think.
Luxembourg, yes.
Oh,
He's making a move. Let's see what's going on here.
Who's the moderator?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, but
Oh.
now we only see the top of your head. Oh, there you are.
Perfect.
Okay, good.
Well, I'm in Ottawa at my uncle's. And
Ah.
yes, I normally live in Luxembourg.
Yeah. Well, it's good to see everybody. I hope Susan may join us later, but in any case, we just thought we would today talk a little bit about, as we're all getting to be of a certain age, and even if somebody's not, at some point they're going to have to deal with it, is what to do with all of your genealogy research and the materials that you've accumulated and things. And to ensure that they don't just disappear. I will post when I send out the email about the video of this being online. I'll post a couple of URLs, but basically, there's a Google search of how to preserve or protect or donate your genealogy research. There's a number of good articles out there. A couple of them are from Family Tree magazine. There's one called How to Pass On Research, What to Include in Your Genealogy Will, and another one, How to Donate Your Genealogy Research So It Doesn't Get Thrown Out. And we won't go into these articles in any depth because you can Google and read those in far greater detail. But I think some of the general points they all seem to make is, number one, organize your materials. Easier said than done. I know, but I know, speaking for myself, this closet door behind me has a lot of old 3-ring binders from when I started doing genealogy in the late 90s, and I wrote things down. I didn't use the computer nearly as much as I do now, and I've got binders and binders of copied materials or transcriptions of things. And, at some point, I would need to pull out and go through those and decide what's pertinent, what might be of value to anybody who is looking at them, whether it's even of value to me. Sometimes when you look back on things, you might be reminded of something that you knew long ago, but had kind of forgotten. But I know if you're like me, I look at a lot of my old notes and written things, and I don't know what I meant by them. And so certainly somebody else reading them isn't going to know. Some years ago, Tad and others may remember Cecilia Parke, who was a lineage leader for the Roger of New Jersey line for many years. And Cecilia had a habit of printing off pages of Parke material from the internet and then sending big manila folders of these things to Tad or to me or to Jean Churchill. And you'd open it up and you just had no idea what to do with it. I mean, there was no context. There were no notes about anything or how it might relate. It was just, she was just gleaning whatever she could off the internet and passing it along like we were going to follow up and make great discoveries. So, I guess we need, when we look at our own material, is to decide what's readily available online or in other sources, and what may be pertinent in our research materials as to how that relates to our research, what a certain thing means. Of course, one of the other points they seem to make is to publish. And if you can publish a book or a booklet or even a blog or a website, a lot of people do that. And if you you cite sources on there, then the need for a lot of those materials you may have doesn't exist, because as long as somebody knows where you got certain material, they can go and check out a census record or a deed or know where to find it. So sometimes in cases you might have a family Bible or your grandparents' original marriage certificate, things like that. Original family documents you would definitely want to preserve, scan it digitally, but also keep it in an archival, acid-free envelope. And one of the other points they make about things like that or other family artifacts, physical artifacts, is to sort of make a genealogy will. And you could even go so far, I know I have, to put some of those items in your actual will if you want those things to go to a certain family member. Otherwise, you may end up getting family arguments over things like that, or in some cases, something might not be recognized as for what it is and may get tossed or sold at a yard sale or something. So if it's important to you as a family piece, then make sure you provide in some way for it to get into the right hands. Another point that they make is, a lot of us do have websites or blogs or whatever. If you want that stuff to survive or have somebody have access to it, again, make sure you provide, username and password information so that, in the event of your demise, somebody can get into that and either maintain it or shut it down if you want it shut down. And that also goes for DNA. DNA accounts. I know Family Tree, and I'm not sure, somebody can tell me if Ancestry has those provisions, but you can certainly designate someone to manage your account. Because I know in our Parks project, that's been going for 20 years now, and there's a number of participants in there who tested 15 to 20 years ago. Some of them are no longer living, or some of them are no longer active. And if nobody can access that account later on, then it just sits there sort of idle. And in the instance we talked about the new big Y700 test coming along, when a new type of test or something comes along, or there's a reason to upgrade or add a family finder to that account, you can't do it if nobody can access that account once the person's gone. So again, guilty. I need to take care of that stuff, sort of thing, for myself. But it's something to think about. Does anybody else have tales or talks or thoughts of what you're planning to do or have done with your research?
Can I ask you about the family tree DNA, Ken? Because I saw in the accounts that they have this idea of beneficiary,
Right.
and they also have this idea of I think it's manager, I think it's called.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just wondering, on the demise of someone, just how difficult or how complicated it might be to be able to acquire access to that account. So to be more specific, what I was wondering in my case, where I manage some, multiple accounts, is whether it would make sense, for example, to make the Park Society, if that was possible, the manager or the beneficiary my concern is about the practicality of that, having access to the necessary documents for family tree DNA to actually give you or give the society access to the account.
Well, I haven't had to actually deal with that to any great degree, but I think it might make more sense for family tree DNA if you made one or both of the project administrators the beneficiary, because they're the ones who are going to know where all the levers and bells are in terms of accessing and managing that information, rather than the Park Society. But yeah, I have a number of kits that I manage, and at some point, yeah, I need to do the same thing, is to make sure that somebody else can get in, and I need to look up and see what the process is. I think sometimes if a person has died, family tree DNA is going to want some sort of proof before they turn over control to someone else.
And FTDNA doesn't actually recognize the Park Society as an entity, do they? Us as administrators of the project?
Yeah, the project, there's an informal connection, obviously, but officially, there's no hard connection or legally or anything like that.
Right, but the administrators of the project will change over time.
Yeah.
So therefore, is there one single, for example, email address that one could cite as a beneficiary, so that the administrators of the family tree DNA project can change over time, but the email address remains constant?
Well, and it would, because both Gary and I have park.org email addresses that are the contact addresses for the Park project. So I'm admin at park.org and Gary's co-admin. And if that person changes, they would still retain, the new person would retain that email address. So in that sense, yeah, it would be a connection to the society.
I think that's a good idea on John's part, because if you have the email address, that's how FTDNA recognizes you primarily. If they can send you a message to that email address and you respond, then you're legitimate. That's pretty much true, right, Ken?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So going back to my concern, I'll just take a couple more minutes if that's okay. So
Sure.
imagine that I, make the Park Society beneficiary for the kits that I manage, and somebody passes away in Northern Ireland. It's going to be very difficult for you to know whether this person is living or deceased. So I'm wondering whether it would be better to put you as manager, and whether it's possible to have multiple managers on a kit. Because therefore, if you're a manager, then you don't need to know the status of the person, whether they're deceased or living.
True. Well, I think the easiest solution for that probably, and again, when I'm down in Houston in November, I should make a note to ask some of the staff. It's much easier to do that in person than emails or calls back and forth. But I think the easiest solution is to make sure that the administrator access level is set to advanced for both the administrator and the co-administrator, because as long as we have advanced access, we can order upgrades, we can change. I think the only thing we can't change is the primary email address for that account. But we can do an awful lot with that advanced access level. It still might not be as complete as you might want in that situation. But
the manager option that they added a while back, that was about a year or two ago, I believe. I don't know how extensive that is practiced by a lot of people yet.
Well, a manager of an account, it really, in a sense, doesn't matter who the person who supplied the DNA is in that sense. They manage the account, and they would be able to order upgrades or anything like that. But I need to look into that more, and at some point we'll talk about it, maybe just on email or something. Because
Yeah, that would be appreciated if you could get a
one
bit
of the
more information about the practicality of handing over somebody's account. You know, as I said, the example of Northern Ireland might be a good one to raise. Thank you.
And I need to discuss with them too the whole European privacy standard, which is different from here and more strict, and how that might affect things. So it can be a sticky wicket, but so your group, of course, is very, very active in terms of upgrading and adding new people and all that. I think one of the things that we need to look at in the DNA project is a concerted, organized effort to reach out to all the participants in all of the groups and urge them to start upgrading and see if there isn't some solution. It's an expensive prospect to upgrade the tests, and a lot of people, if they don't understand the value of it, aren't willing to spend the money. And unless somebody else is willing to fund those tests upgrades, then they're not going to happen. And that's our job to educate all of our participants, I think, in the value of spending that much money, because and seeing what the rewards can be. And I think I mentioned to Tad before, we have, your group is a prime example of learning a great deal. I've got a number in our group 8 who have upgraded, and we're learning more. But there are some huge groups in our project. The Thomas of Virginia, Roger of New Jersey, Robert line. They're huge. They have tons of participants, and very, very, very few have upgraded to the Big Y. And those groups tend to have people who are confirmed descendants of that large that main immigrant group. But there are a string of fragment lineage keys after them, people who are almost certainly descended from that immigrant, but they can't make the connection. And what we have to let people know is that it's possible to figure that out with the new SNP testing. Because I've come to that relatively late and had to get up to speed. But we really need to make an effort to let other people know more about it and why it's important. So that's our project for the next year ahead going forward, I think.
As you know, I think is that in my case, I found that the only way to get people to do this is to actually pay for it. And
yes,
despite my efforts to try and weave a story and try, at least in my mind, to try and demonstrate some of the value of the upgrade to the 700 test or the Big Y test, it doesn't seem to work. And often people, don't have the money or don't have the financing at the time. And therefore, I wonder whether, the members in the Park Society at large, some people may be willing to donate money to the, if you like, our collective benefit of getting people to upgrade. Also, as Gary knows only too well, I struggle with the people who have done the lower level testing, the Y12 and Y25, which is, obviously now being eliminated by family tree DNA. but we need these people also to be, as a minimum, to do the 37. And even just to get them to the 37 requires funding. And as I say, perhaps there are members within the Park Society that would be, willing to donate to help sort of fund this overall push at some point.
Mhm. Well, the difficulty there is that people who have only tested to 12 or 25, chances are they did so many, many years ago. And again, a lot of them are no longer active or are no longer alive. That's one challenge, but also they've sort of walked away from it. So yeah, I think unless we can find the funds, and there certainly can be efforts. I mean, the general fund is there, and we can do mailings. I can do mailings through our MailChimp email to only the members of certain lineage keys, or only in certain DNA groups. I've got them all tagged that way. So we could tailor a message to each group or each lineage, stressing the importance of what, contributing to the greater cause. Because as Tad knows, I mean, there are many members in different lineage keys who are not male Park, eligible to donate DNA, but this is a way for them to advance the research on their line and make a contribution. So I think we just have to make that effort to reach out.
Well, Ken, you unofficially have a project ongoing for Y37, correct? Where you're trying to get at least one or several people from each lineage key that haven't tested before to test DNA.
Yeah, and we should keep reiterating that in the newsletters and online and things, because yeah, we have a standing agreement to fund a Y37 test for any lineage key that is not yet represented in the DNA database. So that would at least get them in and put in the proper group or their own group if that turns out to be the case. Because as I mentioned, I estimate we've only got about
John,
80 or 90% more would tell us so much more.
Carrie and John, have you guys met before? Because you're in the same group.
Through the Zoom meeting we met, yeah.
Yeah, and on some emails and things, yeah.
Sure.
Because Carrie, you have a cousin who's got a test in progress now who could help, refine your SNP results and
Right.
his, yeah.
There's two, in fact. There's two of them,
Oh, okay.
Patrick and Kevin.
Mhm. Well, I didn't mean for this topic to sort of become dominated by DNA, but if anybody has any thoughts about other things, I'm just curious, how many people have published in some form or another, either online or in a paper form, something on their Parks line or any line.
I did a little something, mainly just the tree and some verbiage that sounded interesting to try and get my cousins interested. Hey, look what I found, see if that would start a fire anywhere, and it didn't. But
I mean, it can be as simple actually as just generating a report, from your software, genealogy software, and making that available to family members, either electronically or printing it out and sending copies. I've done some of that recently, and back in 2002, I think I did a small booklet that came from my third great grandfather down, but we've gone a couple of generations back, and it's widened out because of DNA. At some point, I'd love to work with Wilma and others who are related to us and really publish the big book, but we still, you still want to learn more before you do that. But sometimes at some point it's helpful to just put down what you know at a certain given time, sort of a snapshot in time. And if more comes to light after that, you can always add or change to it. But waiting for your research to be finished, we all know is a fantasy.
That's exactly what I struggle with. I have bits and pieces written up here and there, and I keep waiting for, and I don't really have brick walls, but I have holes, if you will, where I can't prove, who wrote this document or that they're actually connected, although I know they are. So I've been kind of waiting for years for everything to fall into place, and the DNA is helping that out. I've really taken advantage of that DNA research and plugged some of those holes, but I've been waiting for it all to fall into place to write the big masterpiece.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden that day is gone or you're gone. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ken, have you been to County Sligo? See where your folks came from?
Yes, I have. I've been there on 2 occasions. And my particular problem, I have found lots of good information when I was in Sligo, particularly at the Drumcliff church yard, where some members of the family are buried. And but my problem with the DNA so far has been there are not that many living Parks males in my line. There are 2 that I know of, and they're not as much interested probably in finding out the information as I did pay for one of them, for Norman Parks, and he was interested, but I'm not technically as expert as I should be on the DNA part. But we've never gone beyond those initial early tests.
Yeah. Did you ever meet any Parks in Sligo when you were over there, or try to find?
No, I did look for them.
Yeah.
And I have seen some on Facebook and things like that, but mostly I am stuck back at my 3rd great grandfather, who was Roger Park, and I don't have all the information I would like about either him or his wife, but I have the best information, of course, is from his son, John Park, and he had a brother, Roger Park, who also a younger brother that never left Ireland. He stayed there. But there are so many Roger Parks, I've had difficulty in finding out which ones. And what I have done so far myself, I have very good information, I think, from John Park, my great grandfather, on down, and from his wife, Isabella Hunter, on down. But I don't, I have, my ancestry file is good. And I have, of course, the things that go with ancestry. I've written extensive comments and notes on there. But I've also done 50 documents, which are about family members, but they're all from various lines of my family. They're not just Parks, but there are enough of those too. I thought the genealogy will is a good idea. I have 2 children. They're both interested. I think my son Tom is the most interested. But my daughter is probably the most technologically efficient in that, much more so than I am, and Tom is much more so than I am too. But I know that that is where I will want probably and Gina knows my password, so
Good.
that answers that problem.
Yeah.
Some
I got an email. Well, I posted something on Facebook about the fact that I'm going to try to get over to County Armagh next summer, and I'm going to piggyback on John, who his group is having a gathering in early July up in Antrim, and and then we'll probably go on around the island and get down to Sligo. And Larry Mitchell, one of our Park Society members, sent me a number of links. He's been there and hotels and sites to see and things like that. So, and I've looked at a couple of lines in Sligo. I think there's at least two different park lines. And Susan Van Allen has been over there. She shared some photographs of some of those stones in the graveyards and things.
Mhm.
And some of those I think are on Find a Grave as well.
Yes, I have a lot of photos as well as documents. And I do have a wedding certificate for my great grandparents, and she was the daughter of the immigrant family. So
You got that at the church.
that has been important to me. And I do save all kinds of things like that. But my problem seems to be that I keep going in many different directions, not just following on the Parks line, but also on my Maybe line,
Mhm.
Barn, and lots of other lines. But that's basically where I am. But
Mhm.
I do would like to get perhaps there's a younger one, a younger Parks male. I don't really know him, but I knew his father well. But his father has passed. But he would be a good candidate for a higher level DNA. I expect if I could get him to go along with it. I could,
Sure. And you made a good point too. You know, we're all sort of focusing on our parks lines here, but you know, we all probably most of us research other family lines, and sometimes those materials would want to go somewhere different. It's not like you're going to take everything in your library and dump it in one repository. You want to make sure it gets in the hands of somebody who has an interest in it, if possible. And I know what I need to do as well is to publish some information on my parks line and make sure it finds its way into a lot of historical societies in the areas where our ancestors lived have family files. And I know when I was starting out years ago, sometimes those could be very helpful. And put something that represents your latest up to date research on that line could be helpful to somebody down the line who, you know, might be years, but as long as it's sitting in there, it's going to be available. And again, it doesn't have to be the last word on your research, but share, you know, what you know at this point. And
Yes,
who knows, you might hear from somebody who could offer information that you wouldn't have known in any other way. So
yes, I do. I was fortunate in that I had two letters that came to me from two different family members. One was another Ken Parks, who was second cousin, but he was very helpful in really getting me started in the beginning. And the letter was from my third great grandfather, Hunter, and that enabled me to find most of the hunters who had come to this country in the early 1800s. And but the Parks line, aside from the line that I'm descended from, I don't find I have not found any connections. It's just from our line down, that seems to be. There are other parks in the area, but I don't think they're related. I haven't been able to find any relationship. So that's basically where
Yeah.
I am.
It's always amazing that you hear stories of an great aunt or a great grandmother or way back then, and they seem to know whether they were kin to somebody of the same name in that area. And usually they were right. Not always, but usually they were right. I know in Roane County, again, where my family was before the Civil War, there's a particular cemetery there where there are two different Parks families buried. But tellingly, they're all on opposite sides of the cemetery, which indicates that they didn't think there was a connection.
When Ruth and I were first, well, a few years after we were married, we moved out of her father's rental home into our first house of our own, and we moved right next to a husband and wife and a daughter whose name was Parks.
Hmm.
And when my father-in-law re-rented the house that we had moved out of, there were two brothers named Parks that moved into that house. And as far as we could tell, there was no relation amongst
Yeah.
any of us. But the mailman sure had a devil of a time figuring out what he should do with the mail.
Yeah. Well, my John always talks. He's from Amish country down there, and there's some very common names like Stoltzfus and John Stoltzfus. It's like John Smith, and yet he said in the old days, the postman was delivering the mail could tell which John Stoltzfus it was for just by what the return address, who was writing to them, where it had been mailed from. So. Anybody else got any thoughts or?
Okay, and I pipe in at this point.
Sure.
I've talked about this in my columns in the newsletter over the years, and I've talked on this in my congregations. I find it's astonishing that people don't think about what happens to my stuff when I'm no longer here. And unfortunately, the human species is a collecting species. The thing I always tell people, it starts when we're about 5 years old and we see a nice rock or a shell at the seashore that we like. So we take it home, we put it on the windowsill, and we add to that until mother says, "Get these darn things off of here. I can't clean this windowsill." So we take and hide it in the bottom drawer of our dresser. And that's great until the bottom drawer of the dresser falls out and mother knows that we never did get rid of them and have collected. And, and the gig is up. But we collect all our lives, and then we get to this point somewhere beyond 50, we realize, oh, what? I've got all this stuff. I got to do something with it because this is going to be a mess for somebody. So, that's something, once we get beyond a certain point, we need to think about how much stuff do we have and start organizing. And that's tough. You have to gird up your loins and say, no, I don't need 10 dress shirts anymore, things like that. And that can be very difficult. In terms of genealogy, I'd say the first thing we need to do is to take time to organize what we have in a logical, rational way and label things in that, so that we have our ducks in a row. If you use some sort of computer program to keep track of things, make sure that's up to date, and scan things, have electronic files out there. That's our first job as family genealogists. The second job is to hunt down for someone who might be interested and might be enticed to follow up after us. And that can be tough. Unfortunately, it seems that people don't get into genealogy until the gray hairs start to appear. And I was quite different. I was into genealogy let's see, 50 years ago. And so, so I've been in a long time, and I'm an unusual case. But for most people, it's when they when they have open, empty house, empty nester house, and they're retired, and all of a sudden now they start thinking about genealogy. But we need to look at our extended family. Not only your kids and grandkids and so forth, but nephews and cousins and so forth, and see if there's anyone there who is interested in doing anything with family history. And if you find one, take them under your wing and, just really dote on them, help them along, encourage them, pass information to them, and get them to the point where they could take over your stuff. If there is somebody who's working, maybe some lines that you're not, segment that stuff and give that to them, but whatever, it's to find someone who can take this up. And, but when you don't have that availability, well, that is tough. What do you do then? And, I don't know, that's the problem. I worry about how many people have found things, but they have been lost because they died. And the people who came in to clean up the stuff had no idea what this was about. And so it just got thrown out, And I've harped about it time and again, and I will harp about it, continuing. And I know in my case, I don't have, for the lines I'm working on personally, no, I don't have anybody to hand that off to. Now, I'm not sure what I'm going to do with that because I have stuff on that. I may pass it to the lineage leader of the line and say, well, here, this is what I have, pass it on to them electronically. About publishing. One of the problems with publishing is, first off, like, for example, with the Roger of West Jersey, Casberg, he published it very, very nice. It was bound, it was very nice, but she made two mistakes. The first mistake was that she just dumped out what the family tree maker produced. And secondly, she didn't freeze the file. She should have saved that file, made it, read only, absolutely read only. Because once you have a file in Family Tree Maker and you add something to it, it changes all the numbering all the way down the line. And so if let's say somebody wants to have a copy of what you published 2 years ago, and you haven't froze that file, the printout they're going to get is going to be different from the one that you had published. And that was the unfortunate thing. She didn't freeze it, and she added it to it. And so when people would make references to numbers that were in their file, it didn't always agree because stuff had been added or deleted or so forth. And I find, now this is a little more technical, you take that file produced by Family Tree Maker, and then you bring it into Word or whatever your word processor is, and then you sort of fix it, you clean it up, you make it decent. There's an awful lot of space lost in one of those files to all the spacing the Family Tree Maker puts in there, and it doesn't make it a good looking file. Look at a well done genealogy, and you'll see it's straightforward and clean, and there's not a lot of excess verbiage there that doesn't mean anything, that is just sort of a restatement of something. So, if you're going to publish, A, lock down the file. 2, don't publish exactly as it comes out of your Family Tree Maker thing, but just, clean it up and make it decent so that it looks professional. Otherwise, it just looks kind of lazy. So, so that's the thing, organize your materials so that if you pass away like that, and it happens, somebody can come in and see what your stuff is and what it is. And yes, in terms of online stuff, my gosh, keep track of where you are registered. Have some sort of a book. This is my little black book that I keep track of all the places that I have accounts or done business with my user ID and password. And I and my partner have an issue. I've given him one of these. He refuses to use it. And I keep telling him, Jack, something happens to you. Yes, you have this little 3x5 card with your password on it, but you identify the site as EA352. I have no idea what EA352 is. And so, it's useless to me. If something happens to him, it's useless to me. And again, this is something I have harped on many times. If you or your partner, your significant other, handles most of the financial affairs, make sure that that both of you know how to get into those accounts. I once did last rites for a fellow out in Waukesha, and I came back from the ICU unit, and his wife was really crying, just really going to market. And I felt, okay, yes, she's losing her husband, but that wasn't the problem. The problem was her husband did all of the financial stuff, all of the banking, and she had no idea how to get into the accounts. And yeah, she had a problem on her hands because when she went to the bank, the bank wasn't very helpful these days. Back in the old days, the banks were, they'd understand that your husband died, you need to know what it is, you need to get access, fine. Nowadays, it becomes a major affair. So you absolutely must make sure that your significant other or whoever is going to have to pick up the pieces knows your financial affairs, where things are, and how to get into them. So that's my homily for the.
Fortunately, today the scope of our discussion only has to deal with our genealogy research, so we don't have to worry about our banking and financial problems.
But it's good for us to keep that in mind.
Oh, sure, yeah. Well, does anybody have anything else on this topic or anything else you want to talk about?
Ken, my wife reminded me, and it's probably a good idea if you're going down to Sligo.
Mm-hmm.
The person that I saw at the Church of Ireland in Drumcliff, St. Columba's Church, was a Mrs. Cunningham. I don't know if she's still alive at this point, but there are people who volunteer at that church. So if you got in touch with somebody there, they can help you. There are lots of parks in that particular church. They're not all related to me, I'm sure, because I don't think we were the wealthy group.
Well, but as a park society, we're interested in any of them. So
yes, of course.
And I do plan to take advantage of this group called Ireland Reaching Out. It's a bunch of volunteers who, if you get in touch with them ahead of time before a trip, they will offer advice and help and guidance on where to go or how to get in touch with people, or I think even meet and help you get around or something. So if it's there, I'm going to use it.
That sounds good. I also got information from the Sligo Genealogy Center, and they were helpful. I felt they weren't perfect. They missed some points, which they should have picked up from the information that I gave them. But they were helpful, and I think they have things on other parks lines too. So that would be a good place for you to start.
Sounds good. Yeah. Well, it's after 4 here in the East. And before you know, it's going to be cocktail time, and then we're taking our house guests out to dinner. So, well, it was good to see everybody. And I read an email to Tad before the meeting got started, but we had an email from a fairly new member who said he couldn't make the meeting today. He's traveling, but he volunteers as an archivist for his local history society, and would be willing to talk about or maybe even help lead any project that a committee might be interested in doing in terms of digitizing either what we already have or accepting things to be put into our archives. So we'll follow up on that, and if any of you here are interested in that, get in touch with Tad, and we'll see what might develop from that. So until next month, stay safe. A reminder, at the end of this month, we'll be having our annual meetings, both the trustees and the staff and the general membership at large. So I'll get an email out with all the details and dates and links to that soon. Okay.
And have you heard about reservation, about the registrations for that convention in Houston, or is that still?
The last thing I saw is they said they had hoped to do it by the end of August, but they're running behind. But they said by the end of September now, so we're getting close.
Getting close, okay.
I was just worried that I'd somehow missed it. But
that's what I was thinking too.
But it hasn't gone out yet, so.
Okay.
As soon as I hear, you'll probably hear as well, but I'll shoot you an email just to make sure. And same with you if you see something.
Yeah.
I haven't booked the flight yet, but I've got the rooms.
Yeah, I did too. I got the room, so.
I know I'm registered, then I'll go ahead and get the plane tickets.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Thanks, Ken.
Okay, good to see everybody. And until either the general meetings or next month's town hall meeting, we'll see you all then. See you around the ranch.
Thank you, Ken.
Okay, take
Ken.
care, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
And if you got 5 seconds, I want to show you something.
Oh, sure.
It's not a Parks thing.
Oh, okay.
It's it reminded me looking at your background.
Oh,
I was trying to decide.
you can
what
see my
color
banjo.
I was trying to decide what color to paint my closet doors or what to put on them. And I saw your closet door and I go, that's what I'm going to do. So there you have it.
Yeah. Yeah. I eventually, gradually, it seems like our whole house is turning into shades of black, white, and gray. It's very
so is all the traffic on the
monochromatic.
highway too.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought you were going to talk about my banjo in the corner, which
No,
hasn't
I didn't
been
notice
touched
that,
in so long. I saw on Facebook, incidentally, a couple of ads, and it looks very interesting for, they show it with a guitar, but it's called Picasso, Pickso, Picasso, yeah. And basically it's a little bow, but it's a double-sided bow. And there are examples of people playing the guitar. Either you can do single string or 2 strings adjacent, or you can bow across. And it seems like it could be very interesting, because if you were sitting in a group playing and you didn't have a fiddle player, it's basically sounds a lot like somebody playing the fiddle. They're not cheap. I went online. It looks like anywhere from $60 to $90, but
the fiddle bridge is curved so that you can choose which string to fiddle.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the picked instruments are pretty flat.
Well, it looked like they were mostly playing. Well, no, they did some on the bass strings too, but I think they used the hole in the middle to get down in there. So,
yeah,
but just Google it or something and see what you think. Picasso, Pickso. Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Well, so long, everybody.
Thanks much.
Bye-bye.
Till later.